James, and I'd like to welcome you to the Oracle Outlook for the week starting October 30th, 2017. This week, I wanted to continue to honor those requests for more Kipper-related content, and an interesting thing has been happening. As I started to honor the requests, more requests have been coming in. So I'm very appreciative for those of you who have taken time to express how you enjoy the way I present Kipper-related content and have asked for more. So the deck that's going to be assisting me this week is probably no surprise, because it's only one of two Kipper decks that I have. It is the Fin de Siècle Kipper cards. They are by Ciro Marchetti, and the mass market version is published by US Game Systems Incorporated. So I have the deck on hand. I'm going to take a moment to shuffle the cards, and just as I do every week, my intention and question is always, what do we need to know for the week ahead? Feeling that will do. I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck and fan the cards out. And now I'm going to be picking 5, because when I work with Kipper, I do a line of 5. So I'm just looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. And now that I have the 5 cards selected, I'm picking up the remainder of the deck and putting it aside. And when I work with a line, I always start with the middle card. For me, the middle card represents a central issue or what we're being asked to focus on for the week ahead. So looking at the card, we have the child card. So the child card can come up when, for some of us, if we are parents, we may be focusing on our children this week, being the middle card, so there may be some, and it makes sense because here in the United States, we're going to be having Halloween on Tuesday. So that could be for those parents who are going to be spending time getting their kids dressed up, taking them out, you know, that kind of thing. So it could be in relation to that. It could just be, if it's not about the holiday, it could just be like there's maybe a strong need to focus on our children this week. The other thing, if you're not a parent and you don't have children, I do not. So then for me, my other meaning for the child card when it comes up is that there may be something that we're focusing on that's new or in its beginning stages this week, because the child card in that regard for me can represent something new or something beginning. So again, child card can represent a couple of things. Number one, it could represent a need to focus on children, or there's going to be an issue that centers on a child or children this week, or that we are being asked to focus on either starting something or the beginning stage of something, because those are the meanings that I have for the child card. So we'll get more information about that when we look at the cards surrounding it. So starting with the card on the far left, okay, this is interesting. So we have main male starting off the line. Then in between main male and the child card, we have imprisonment. Okay. And then moving to the other side of child, we have courthouse. And then rounding out the line, we have expectation. Okay. So what I typically do is, after I've taken initial look at all the cards, I go one step out and I look at the cards that are immediately flanking the center card. So on the left of child, we have imprisonment. In traditional Kipper cartomancy, this is known as the prison card, right? So imprisonment for me can represent being in a space where we may be experiencing some form of limitation or restriction. If you play on the idea that the person in the card is in a jail cell, right? So that's a limited or restricted space, right? So there's that. So it could be like, what are we working through? So that with the child card, it could be a new restriction or limitation, the beginning stage of limitation or restriction, you know, and going with that, it could be too, like if we go with the idea that child can represent size, then this could represent something small. So it could be like in the beginning stages, you know, the start of limitation or restriction, but it could also be a limitation or restriction that's really small in size. It's really just small in nature, you know? So there's that. It could also be some form of limitation or restriction pertaining to a child, you know? And here's where I'm going with that. The reason I would go with that is because imprisonment, like I said, is known as prison, right? And prison, for me, can sometimes represent a tall building, right? And it makes me think of Tower from Lenormand. And so as a result of that, some of my meanings for prison can represent isolation, it could represent withdrawal, it could represent being alone, you know, solitary, you know, and that would make sense playing on the idea, the imprisonment card here could be like solitary confinement, you know, being in a space where you are kind of locked away, you know, that kind of thing, or maybe being locked out, that kind of thing. So there may be something in which there is some sort of limitation or restriction pertaining to a child. And if we go further with that, then the imprisonment card can represent somebody who's cut off. So it could be like somebody who's cut off from a child, you know, where some sort of limitation or restriction has been imposed concerning a child, you know, that kind of thing. So I'm seeing that with the imprisonment card. So again, imprisonment can represent some form of limitation and restriction. It could represent being isolated, being withdrawn, being in solitude, that kind of thing. The other thing about, as I'm talking about that, if I go with the idea that prison can represent a tall building, then, like I said with Tower, it makes me think of Tower from Lenormand, then that can also be about an institution, you know, a corporation, a company, some kind of firm. But I'm going to go more with the institution. So those are some aspects of imprisonment for me. On the other side of the, I was going to say other side of the aisle, and I guess because of where I'm going with this. So on the other side of the child card, the line, we have courthouse. So courthouse is a card that can represent public affairs, right? It could represent an actual courthouse, right? So there could be something having to do with, you know, a legal decision needing to be made, because that's where these types of things happen in a courthouse. Legal decisions are made. I tend to look at this as public affairs because at the time that this deck system was created, most things that had to be heard or had to be determined or decided on was in a public setting, you know. So there may be something having to do with a public affair, you know, maybe something having to do with a legal matter with courthouse. It could just be, if it's not about a legal matter per se, then it could just be, you know, needing to make a decision, right? And so with that, it could be a decision that centers on a child. So with imprisonment, child, and now courthouse, it makes me feel like there may be something having to do with maybe a legal situation involving a child. So somebody may not be able to see a child as much as he or she would like. And so maybe that's it. And so maybe there's a court case or a legal matter involving a child, and maybe in terms of custody, you know, or something of that nature. But it's making me feel like there's some sort of limitation or restriction that centers around a child, and it may be involving something of a legal nature. There may be a legality tied to that. So I'm seeing that with courthouse. But again, it could just be too, like there may be some sort of decision that needs to be made regarding a matter, right? Now, going one step out, we have main male. So main male is a significator card, and it can typically represent a man, right? So just like we had the lady card from Lenormand last week, main male is the same as a gentleman card in that deck, and typically it represents a man. So if you're a woman watching this video, then main male could be a man who's significant to you, and if you're a man, then main male would represent you, right? So now, the interesting thing about this card showing up at the beginning of the line, Kipper is a system that is very focused heavily on direction, and his back is to the right. So as the start, he is now in front of the entire line of cards, right? So all the cards technically are behind him, right? So they could be elements of his past. So now if we go with imprisonment being the next card, right? So here we have main male opening up the lineup, and then imprisonment would be next to him. So this could be a man who's going through some sort of limitation or restriction. This could also be a man who is, isolated, withdrawn, maybe in solitude, that kind of thing. So there's two ways of reading that. It could also be a man who has maybe imprisoned himself, kind of thing. It could also be if we go with the idea that prison is a card that can represent a tall building, then this could be a man who maybe is a part of a company, corporation, institution, right? So there's that. It could also be a man who maybe for whatever reason cannot get beyond the limitations or restrictions of his past, right? So there's that way of reading main male and imprisonment. And I'm saying this too because I already talked about a situation involving a child, right? So now the child is the middle card. So now here we have the possibility of a man and his child, right? And then with that, then imprisonment can represent a block between a man and his child, right? So somebody may be feeling a sense of being cut off, a man in particular being cut off from his child, right? So there's that with these three cards. And then that would make sense again with courthouse following child, right? So this could be the possibility here if we pair child and courthouse, right? So let's say there's a man who's going through some sort of limitation or restriction, a sense of isolation or separation from his child. Then that could be the beginning of a legal matter, courthouse, right? Or that the man is going to be experiencing a decision being made regarding his child. And especially maybe if he has been having limited visits with his child, that would be imprisonment, right? So, and then this makes sense because now at the end of the line we have expectation. Expectation is a card that can represent waiting for something and being patient, right? The woman on the card is looking out of a window. So this typically represents like what she's anticipating, what she's expecting, what she may have to wait to arrive, right? So there's that. But now that doesn't necessarily mean that this pertains to a woman because a woman's on the card. The general meaning of this card is about, having a sense of expectancy, waiting for something, anticipating something. Now, because Kipper is very heavily relied on direction, she is looking to the left. She's facing courthouse. So here it is about waiting for a decision to be made, and it could be, again, a legal decision, right? So, but again, it's just waiting for this decision to be made. So now, and here's the interesting thing. So now if we take the expectation card and pair it with the other outer card, we have main male and expectation. So there could be like this person is the one who has the sense of expectancy, right? Could also be too, if we flip it, there may be a sense of an expectation being placed on a man, right? So in one way of reading this, he could be the one who has the expectation. He could be the one who's waiting. He could be the one with the sense of anticipation. But flip it, then we could also have, there's an expectation being placed on him, right? And here's the interesting thing, because he's not facing this card, it could be there's an expectation being placed on him that he's not aware of because he can't see it. Right, so that's a couple of ways of reading that. So now I'm going to take a moment to look at the line to see if there's anything else that I want to say about it. So I think what I'll do is I'll just read the cards in forward narration to kind of sum things up. So again, starting off the line, we have a situation that opens up involving a man, right? So again, if you're a woman watching this video, then it could be a man who's significant to you. If you're a man, then this could be you to some degree, right? And again, keeping with the idea of direction in mind, he's not facing all the other cards. So main male. Then we have imprisonment. So this could be, a sense of isolation, a sense of withdrawal, a sense of solitude. It could also be some sort of limitation or restriction. And again, that could be something that's being imposed on the man because it's behind him. So this could be a part of his past. This could be a limitation or restriction that has been already imposed on him. So this is not going to be anything new to him because he's already gone through it because it's behind him, right? So there's that. You know, it could also be too, if you're a woman watching this video and the main male, be mindful of a man who may want to impose some sort of limitation or restriction on you, right? It could also be too, like maybe you are needing to seek time away, you know, or needing to seek some sort of solitary space, some sort of isolation away from a man, right? So there's that. Child, moving to child. Child is a card that can represent something having to do with an actual child, and it's making me feel like the cards here really are talking about maybe a situation that involves a child. It could be a legal situation involving a child, and there's some sort of limitation or restriction around that. So that's child. Child could represent an actual child. Could also be something that's in its beginning stages or something that is just starting up if the child aspect doesn't fit for you, right? But it's making me feel like there is something having to do with a man and a child this week, right? And then we move on to courthouse. Courthouse can represent, you know, something having to do with the legal system, court of law. It could also represent a decision needing to be made. So could be saying too, like there's going to be a decision needing to be made, so regarding a child or regarding the starting of something or the beginning of something. There's a decision being made around that, right? And then expectation, rounding out the line, is that there's going to be a sense of expectancy, expecting something. Could also be that we are waiting for something to arrive in the future. So now here's the thing about this card. Sometimes as the last card, I'm going to throw this out, even though I do these readings in the span of a week, that expectation could be something that takes place within a 3-month period of time. So this could be, if we go with the idea that child represents something that's in its beginning stages, it may not be resolved until a period of time between now and 3 months from now. And that would make sense if we go with the idea of courthouse being a court of law and a legal decision needing to be made. You know, sometimes these things don't happen overnight. So there may be a period of waiting for either the system. You know, sometimes people say like the wheels of justice turn very slowly. So it could be just waiting for the, you know, the system, waiting on the system, or that we are waiting for the decision and the decision is not going to be made right away. So on that note, I will end and round out this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a wonderful week. Take care.